the premise on which the Congress had been fighting the case was that the Dholpur palace does not belong to Vasundhara Raje or to her son Dushyant Raje, and it is a Sarkari property.
Forgive me.
My question is,
the argument on which Congress is fighting is that she was, as leader of the opposition, giving a character certificate to a man who they believe was an offender from the law, that he's wanted by the law, and in addition she asked for that to be kept secret from the Indian government, which some congressmen interpret, perhaps exaggeratedly, as treason.
I'll answer that as well. But as far
briefly,
as
let's not go through the whole history of everything.
As far as Dholpur Palace is concerned, because they do not have the right documents, because they have been, in particular Mr. Jairam Ramesh has been proved wrong, that's why they are not gone to any court of law for a want of an FIR or for want of any investigation. They have been proved wrong there. As far as Vasundhara Raje misappropriately wanting Lalit Modi's citizenship in UK is concerned, it was just a witness statement, it was not a testimony, and as per the UK Civil Rule 1998, since it was not testified, it does not hold any ground. As far as Shivraj Singh Chauhan is concerned, let me maintain over here, the High Court number of times and the Supreme Court as early as about a fortnight ago had begun its verdict by saying that we appreciate the stand of the Madhya Pradesh government.
How lucky you are. How very convenient and how lucky you are. But Naresh Gujral, after that long list of self-justificatory arguments from Sambit Patra, I want to quote to you what a very highly regarded BJP MP, a former chief minister, a former cabinet minister of Atal Bihari Vajpayee's government, has actually said in a letter to Amit Shah. I'm talking in fact about Shanta Kumar. This is what he says. From Rajasthan to Maharashtra, people have started pointing fingers at us. Reports about Madhya Pradesh's Vyapam scam made all of us bow our heads in shame. And then he adds, BJP workers are unable to face it. Now, if senior BJP leaders, highly respected people feel like this, then why is it wrong for the opposition to demand resignations first, an investigation first, and hold up Parliament till that happens? After all, bringing the executive under scrutiny and making them accountable is what the role of Parliament is. Discussion is a secondary feature of Parliament, but the first is to hold the executive to account.
Karan, first of all, I won't like to comment on the internal affairs of the BJP. What one member of Parliament has said, that is for their party to reflect and decide the course of action. But the basic point is that unless we debate, unless everything that the MPs claim, the opposition MPs claim, that there are evidences against these ministers and chief ministers, let that come in the public domain through a discussion. Why are they shying away from discussion? More so at a time when there are path-breaking legislations being held up, GST is being held up, real estate bill is being held up. We all know how that's going to completely be a game changer as far as the economy is concerned. But basically they are doing this because they don't want these path-breaking legislations to go through in this session.
Let me put that point you made to Pavan Verma, and then I'll put it to Abhishek as well. Many people outside Parliament, who perhaps are not aware that the prime duty for legislature is to hold the executive accountable. The duty of the legislature is not to govern. Governance is the prerogative and duty of the executive. Nonetheless feel that if the government is willing to debate, a good politician should debate, should have that discussion, make your point. After that, if you're not satisfied, you still have the right to disrupt. But why disrupt first? Have the debate, hear their arguments. You might be convinced, you might not. But leave the disruption for later. How do you respond to that common man's sense of wisdom?
I think the common man also wants that to see Parliament not only as a forum for the unilateral agenda of the government, but as a forum of democratic accountability. I maintain, and I have stated it before, that the Union Minister and the two Chief Ministers should have resigned on moral grounds even before Parliament met, and then Sushma Swaraj ji, in her capacity as a Member of Parliament, could have given her statement or her point of view. Can you hear me, Karan?
I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah. Now, the second reason why a discussion will really lead nowhere is that you just heard Mr. Sambit Patra, who calls the action of Sushma Swaraj compassion, who dismisses Vasundhara Raje's allegations against her by saying Jairam Ramesh was wrong, and who says that in the case of Mr. Shivraj Singh Chauhan, everything is gung-ho. The point of the matter is very clear today, that all the facts are in the public realm.
Okay.
None of them have been really said to be wrong. Whereas Sushma Swaraj said that she did not call up the British High Commissioner who was on leave, rather than consult her own government or contact the High Commissioner in London. Where has she said that? So the facts are known, and what I find extremely expedient and in fact cynical is that the head of government, the Prime Minister, says nothing. Dr. Manmohan Singh was temperamentally silent. This silence is exceptionally expedient and cynical.
You know, let me bring in Abhishek Singhvi on that point. It is arguable, as you've just heard Pavan Verma say, I made the same point myself a moment ago to Sambit Patra, that the facts are known because the press has published them, the press has debated them. But Parliament, being sovereign, has a right to debate and discuss them all over again if it wants. You can't deny it for a moment. And even when, for instance, something like the phone tapping scandal shook Britain, and all the facts were out, Parliament in Britain nonetheless debated the whole matter again before the Prime Minister decided what action was needed. All that Mr. Modi and the BJP government today are saying is, let us have the prerogative to do the same thing. Let's debate the matter again. Let's rehash the arguments. You may not be convinced by us, but then go in for disruption if you think that we're offering as action is not acceptable.
I think you've partly answered the point yourself, Karan. Not when the circumstances indicate that this is nothing but a stonewalling and delaying tactic. For God's sake, this has been in the public domain for every minute comma and full stop for 3 months. There is nothing to debate, but nobody is suggesting that Parliament is precluded from debating. But in 2.5+ months, something concrete should be done.
Parliament is certainly being prevented from debating by your party and perhaps Pavan Verma's party today. You're holding up Parliament, you're preventing Parliament,
because
and that is considered to be wrong.
We find that the only way to force the government into sub-action is to make our demonstration through Parliament very clear. That is true. But let me tell you, time and again for the last half an hour I am hearing,
you're forcing Parliament to do what you want Parliament to do, rather than giving Parliament the choice to decide for itself. That's the problem. You're forcing the issue.
No, Parliament will not discuss ad nauseum. Parliament will not discuss ad nauseum when concrete criminal action is required as a prerequisite to discussion. Give me just 2 minutes, Karan. Everybody, Mr. Sambit Patra is repeatedly trying to portray the triviality, irregularity. Mr. Shivraj Singh Chauhan was the medical education minister for 4 years. His OSD was in jail. He has been repeatedly, everybody close to him has been implicated. His name of his family is in the list. Ms. Sushma Swaraj has actually directly concealing from a ministry tried to help somebody who at that time had no travel documents and could not have got it.
I'm not sure whether she concealed it from the ministry. She simply didn't inform the ministry. The two are different. Not informing doesn't tantamount to concealing. Be careful with the language you use.
Section 13, which you have mentioned many times, does not require a pecuniary benefit, a common misconception. Section 13 of Prevention of Corruption Act requires no pecuniary benefit. A favor shown absent public interest is Prevention of Corruption Act. And lastly, Ms. Raje was clearly concealing. She wrote she is concealing. What is this argument? That it doesn't
but what she was concealing arguably was not a crime. That's the critical point. What she wanted concealed was not a crime. She has the right to give a character witness for a friend, and it is not a crime to say hide it from the government, particularly if that government in the shape of the Martyr Commission is being vindictive.
A morally and legally fair government would have simply said 2 things: step down for 2 months, have a Supreme Court judge retired or sitting independently investigate, and resume your services after 3 months.
All right, I'm going to take a break at that point. I'm going to come back after the break and tackle the key issue that lies at the bottom of the discussion we're having, and it is the key question of, is obstruction, is what I loosely call the holding of Parliament to ransom, so that Parliament then does what you think it should do, a good, legitimate parliamentary tactic? And before you all jump to a conclusion and say holding someone to ransom can never be the right thing to do, remember, Arun Jaitley famously in January 2001 said, and I'm quoting him, obstructionism can be a legitimate parliamentary tactic. The question after the break is it legitimate today in these circumstances, or after the experience of 2011, and perhaps because of the particularities of this particular moment, it's not justified? That's the key issue that underlies the problem in Parliament today. We're going to take it up after the break. Welcome back. You're watching To The Point. We're discussing the battle lines in Parliament and the key issues that underlie it. Sambit Patra, let's take up that point we ended part one with. The question, is obstructionism a legitimate parliamentary tactic, particularly in the present circumstances? I'm going to quote to you what Arun Jaitley said to Business Line on the 31st of January 2011. He said, obstructionism can on certain occasions be a legitimate parliamentary tactic. Now, when it's Congress's turn, why shouldn't that logic be used by them against you?
No, as Mr. Arun Jaitley rightly pointed out, it can be one of the legitimate means of parliamentary democracy, which is still one. I believe the last option should not be exercised as the first option. Let me borrow a few words from the respected President's office. Mr. Pranab Mukherjee recently in one of his speeches in Chennai said, there are 5 Ds in democracy. The 4 important Ds being debate, discussion, dissent, but ultimately followed by a decision. Then this is right democracy. The 5th D, that is disruption, should not be used frequently, and that is what Mr. Arun Jaitley maintained.
But you used it for the whole of the winter session in 2011.
But that should be the last
every
option,
single
not
day
the
of
first
the winter
option.
session you used it. Suddenly, when it's against you, this concern about not using it frequently becomes a problem. But when you used it for every day. You held up the entire winter session.
10 seconds, Karan. First, there is a famous saying in the Westminster system of governance that the opposition should have its say, but ultimately the mandate should have its way. And the mandate is with this government which is functioning at present.
Actually, the phrase is not mandate, it's government. And the problem is the government's not in a majority in the Rajya Sabha, so your erudition doesn't apply to the particular illustration to which you're trying to make it fit, but I'll excuse you that. Let me bring in Kalikesh, because Kalikesh, the key issue being made by Sambit Patra is that whilst he concedes obstructionism is a legitimate tactic on certain occasions, he believes this particular circumstance is not the right occasion. What's your answer to that? As someone who doesn't belong to either side, does obstructionism serve a purpose, and is it legitimate in the present circumstances?
Well, as I've said, Karan, that the party would like discussion. So the party is very clear on that. However, we've seen that skins have thickened over the past few decades. There was a time when Parliament was never disrupted, and there was also a time when a railway accident happened and ministers would resign. Both those times don't exist any longer. I think the problem here is that there has been a lack of definitive action which could act as a credible action against the allegations made against the ruling government, and that's really resulted in this logjam. I am not for one saying that the allegations are true or not true, but if there was credible investigation applied to begin with in all these issues, even in the Sushma Swaraj's issue, if there was a sitting judge which would have investigated, it wouldn't matter whether she would have resigned or not. You know, the matter would be investigated and a decision would have come. So I think these issues are still pending. Let's say in the case of Mrs.
I'm trying to bring you to a point. Are you therefore saying in these circumstances obstructionism is not legitimate?
Well, again, as I said, my party is very clear. We would like to hold discussions in the...
but you also were very clear when you said that Shivraj Chauhan should step down. Now, is obstructionism legitimate in trying to ensure that Shivraj Singh Chauhan steps down, limited to just him?
As I said, my party would like to have discussion and does not...
But you didn't want discussion in the case of Shivraj Singh Chauhan unless you changed your position. In the case of Shivraj Singh Chauhan earlier on, you were very clear he must step down.
I believe that he should have stepped down because allegations as grave as this and the kind of not only financial allegations but also criminal allegations, he should have stepped down.
So clearly obstructionism is legitimate in his case. That follows as day follows night.
Not necessarily. I mean, we believe he should step down, but if he doesn't, we don't believe that Parliament should be held up.
You're not just a politician, you're a juggler with logic. I applaud you for your facility to squeeze out of difficult situations. Well done. Let me bring in Naresh Gujarat, and let me put to you, Naresh, the point made by Pavan Verma a moment ago. He spoke about the fact that when questions of propriety were raised against Pavan Bansal, Ashwini Kumar and Ashok Chavan, the BJP ensured that they resigned on the grounds that propriety was sufficient grounds for ministers to step down, and they did. Similar issues of propriety are raised against Sushma Swaraj, Vasundhara Raje Scindia, and even worse, against Shivraj Singh Chauhan. In one case, you have yourself accepted there's an error of judgment, which is perhaps euphemism for misuse of office. Surely, the standards that applied when Congress was in power against people like Chavan, Bansal and Kumar should now apply again.
Karan, in the case of Mr. Chavan and in the case of Mr. Pavan Bansal, their family members were found red-handed with their hands in the till. That is not the case today. As far as Mr. Ashwini Kumar is concerned, let me point out that he was interfering in the work of a constitutional authority against specific orders of the Supreme Court. That is why he had to step down. In this case, there is no such evidence that Mrs. Swaraj or any of her family members has benefited financially from her actions.
Oh, well, you could argue, could you not, that in fact her daughter benefited because in fact Mrs. Swaraj in effect did what the daughter wanted and was fighting in court. Restoring the passport, Mrs. Swaraj made it possible for him to get alternate travel documents. It in effect did what the daughter was wanting.
Not true. The daughter was working for a law firm. She was only getting a salary.
She happened to be one of the team of lawyers
Mr. Modi or you or me, that did not matter. She still would have got her salary.
All right, that's a fairly narrow interpretation of propriety, but you're clearly entitled to it. Let me bring in Pavan Verma and put this to you. You are taking the view that there are at times occasions when obstructionism is a legitimate tactic because it forces Parliament or it forces the government, more importantly, to do the right thing. But at this moment, the obstructionism is happening at the cost of critical bills like the land bill and the GST bill, both of which are not just critical to the economy, but more importantly, to the welfare of millions of Indians. Is it right for you to make this trade-off in the cavalier fashion you are and insist that propriety first, Parliament will be held up till resignations happen, and if the bills suffer and if people's progress suffers, so be it?
Karan, let me say quickly to you, obstructionism for the sake of obstructionism is wrong. I believe, and I have written about this, that Parliament should function. In its entire history, the House of Commons has not been adjourned for a single day, and soon we'll have a situation where we'll set a record that there is not a single day when our Parliament is not adjourned. It should run. But I'm amazed. I want to make this point, and I want to make it with seriousness. The relentless aggression shown by the BJP for any kind of deviation by their opponents is matched equally by the completely morally unethical bravenness they show when they are caught on the wrong foot themselves. What should Parliament do if they are not willing to accept that there is wrongdoing, that an investigation needs to be done,
at the cost of GST and land, the economy and development and the welfare of the poor?
When they impose these standards themselves against their opponents.
But Pavan Verma, the question I asked was, should all of this happen at the cost of GST, the land bill, development of the poor? Is that an effective and efficient sacrifice to make?
Very good question, Karan. Let me give you an answer. You look at the record of the last two sessions since the BJP came to power. More bills have been passed in the cooperative atmosphere of Parliament with the opposition working with the Treasury benches. 90%, 100% use of the time. Look at the previous session when the BJP was in opposition. to record is 60 to 70% of time, and important bills which they are now pushing forward, which are important for the country. The insurance bill, the GST, they held up. That's why I am amazed at this spectacular double standard the BJP is showing. It's newfound discovery for the parliament.
You made an effective point. Let me bring in Abhishek Singhvi. Abhishek Singhvi, I'm not going to ask you about the legitimacy of obstructionism because you clearly believe it's legitimate. I want to ask you instead, how long could this possibly continue? The government doesn't look as if it's going to give in. Clearly they're not going to concede that resignation should precede the debate. You're not going to change your position either. So how long will this continue? Could the whole monsoon session be lost?
Well, the first person to whom that question should be put is the government and not us. It's very much in their hands and in their court how long it would last. They should show credible, real movement towards what is the objective, the broad objective of many parties, especially with regard to most of these cases, if not all. Secondly, as of today, I'm not suggesting that there are no via media, but as of today, as the session starts, in the all-party meeting yesterday, in the general statements in the press outside, in the belligerence showed by BJP spokesperson on the channels, in the absolute silence maintained even now by the Prime Minister, we see no beginnings of that beginning of a solution which the BJP has to make first, which the NDA has to make first. So I think I will only lob the question right back
to where it belongs. Holding a gun to the government's hand, and the gun is in the shape or form of we won't let Parliament function unless the ministers step down. So what you're doing is you're saying to the government, if you want Parliament to function, they resign. If they don't resign, it won't function. And to use a colloquialism, to hell with the bills that don't get passed.
Actually, all that we are doing is telling the government to withdraw the gun it is holding at our head and to allow Parliament to function. The gun which the government is holding is, we will not budge a millimeter on any of the very, very serious corruption cases and other cases. We will not at all cooperate. So we are asking for withdrawal of a gun, not holding a gun.
All right, it's interesting who's got the gun and who's holding who to ransom, but clearly at the end of the day what is losing out is the effective, efficient functioning